Hi, in this short video, I'll show the use of the scatter chart to capture a variation in a selected statistic across multiple runs. So the model that I have opened is a variation of the one provided as an example with ExtendSim, the DESS-MM1 model. What I've added to this is a database that captures the run numbers and average cycle time for each run, and I've set it to run for 5 runs. So to capture, to create a graph of this data, there are multiple ways to do this. I'm first going to show how to do this with a scatter chart block. So I'll click on that, place it right here. And so this requires, you can put inputs of X and Y pairs. So for X, I'll use the run number. And for Y, I'll take the average cycle time. And then I'll go ahead and modify the, update the options here of the chart. So it's set up to show 3 traces. I'll just reduce this window or truncate this window. So just show the one that we want to look at. I'll do the right click, and with right click, I go into trace editor. I change the type from like a bar chart kind of thing to a line chart. And I can change the name here to say average CT. So that's one. Then again, I right click, I pick up graph properties. On the value, X value, I'll say run number. And on the Y value, that's average cycle time. And you don't have to change these parameters, but just to have, we can change it to 5 intervals on each side to not make these axes very busy with multiple intervals. So that setup, the main thing is really in the dialog where we are setting what we are actually going to be plotting. So we are just doing one trace or one set of data for average cycle time. Most of the options we can leave as default. We want at the end of the simulation data to be written. And only the last thing, one thing that I'll change is go to this run. And so see, I'm clicking on in the column title down arrow, and I'm going to select only end values. Say okay. And so with that, it's set up. I'll go ahead and run, and the run will do 5 runs. As you see from the bottom, 5 runs were done. If I click it, this open, here's our chart showing the cycle time over 5 runs. And you can see that in the data also. First run was 5, then 9.5, 1.76. It's quite varying across these runs. On the graph, you'll see something like that, where, yeah, for the third run, if you remember, at 1 point something. So that way, you can have the XY chart plot the data. Now, another way to do this, you might say, well, if we already have the data in the database, why do we have to do this over? The data already exists. Rather than writing the data 2 places, we are writing it 1 place already. So for that, there's this other block called DB-Line-Chart. Now, the one requirement here for the DB-Line-Chart is that it requires a time axis, so we don't have in our database. In this case, the database that we are using is this metrics across runs. Let me open that again. And so that has 2 fields, but we do not have a field that captures time. And actually, in this case, we are not really looking for plotting by time. We are trying to plot by runs. So what we can do is basically set up a field, another field, and I'll call that run number. And I'll use that as the time field. So we are kind of tricking the system in giving us data across different runs by defining the run number as the time field. So I'll close that. Now, once we have defined an additional field, you would expect to see this has 3 inputs. And so I found that you have to open it, again, and then multiple fields. I kind of say multiple fields again. Say OK. And so now you see there are 3 inputs now here. So we have an input for the third field also. And so I'm going to take the run number as the third input into a field. Okay. So now we have in the database, we'll be reading the run number as the third field. Now we go back to our LineChart DB-Line-Chart block and do something similar in terms of the trace and the graph values. So I'll select this, hide these things, do a right click, trace editor, change this to average CT, and let me say to differentiate from DB. I'll change that type to a line graph, close that, right click again, graph properties. Instead of time, we are calling it run number. Values are average cycle time again. And I'm changing this. So if you look at what's the axis here on the y-axis, we have so many, I think this probably is 10 intervals. And so we are going to change them to 5 for x and 5 for y. Well, let's do 5. Close that. And again, the key part is in the dialog. So here there are multiple options, and you can read through these options. If you click help, help then provides you context sensitive, of course, just for this particular window. What are the different options? What you can set to? So for example, the field I was just referring to, you can do 1 cell per trace, 1 field per trace, 1 table per trace, and so on. And so you can take the time to go through the options. But in the quick thing we will do here is we'll say 1 table per trace. So we want to create the graph right from the table, 1 selected table. We do want to collect data at end of simulation. And then we'll select the table here. Metrics. The time field. Now for the time field, we are actually using the run number as the time field. So we'll put the run number as the time field. As the data field, we'll pick up the average cycle time. And actually, if you want, we can really do another trace with another data field. So in the second row, we will do run number and average number of people. But for now, just to show this capability here, I'm just going to keep with one field. And for the run, again, we can click here. We want to show just the current table, and the current would be at the end of the run. So we'll take the current version at the end of the run. And with that's set up. We say OK. And so right now, database does not have the data on the field, so on the run number field that we just added. So that's why we need to run it to populate that, and then we can look at the graph. So here we go. We just ran it. We look at and the scaling sometimes get messed up. So we'll just do a right click and say auto scale X, and so that now fixes that. So this is the average CT. We had made the name somewhat longer. Average CT is from DB, and the other one, the XY chart, of course, is still showing us that chart. So you can see from both blocks, of course, it's the same data. We are getting the same chart, so this kind of verifies both of them are working correctly. So this is a quick demo of how would you go about creating charts that can show you data across multiple runs, and you can use either one. If you're using for somehow manually updating values in between runs, in that case you would need to use the DB line chart that saves the data from run to run, and you can plot that. If you are able to do the multiple runs with whatever modification needs to be done as done automatically, in that case you can just use XY chart and actually not even write in the database. You can straight write values into the XY chart. And so with that, I'll stop here. I guess I'll save this file as DSMM1 with DB, and I'll just say chart with DB and chart. With that,